Every night the scratching returned. Anna pressed her ear to the wooden steps, heart pounding, listening to the frantic claws raking the boards beneath her feet. She told herself it was just rats, but the sound was too deliberate, too desperate. Shadows pooled in the narrow gap below, swallowing the flicker from her flashlight. One night, unable to bear it, Anna pried up a loose step. The scratching stopped. Silence pressed in, thick and expectant. She peered into the darkness, breath fogging in the sudden chill. Something pale moved, fingers, no, not fingers, curling around the edge. Anna recoiled, but the thing surged upward, impossibly fast. Cold hands gripped her ankles, yanking her down, splinters tearing her skin. She screamed, but the board snapped shut above her, muting the sound. The scratching began again, more frantic than ever. Upstairs, the house was silent, except for the occasional whimper that drifted up from below, muffled and hopeless. By morning, only the echo of claws remained, etching new lines in the wood, always hungry, always waiting for the next curious ear pressed too close to the dark. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts. Mia found the doll half buried beneath the roots of the old elm, its porcelain cheeks cracked, dress tattered, yet its glass eyes shined with an unnatural clarity. That night, as she tucked it beside her pillow, a sharp sting pricked her palm. She winced, spotting a bead of blood welling where a tiny thorn protruded from the doll's hand. She tried to brush it off, but the prickling sensation lingered as she drifted into uneasy sleep. By morning, the doll's limbs had sprouted thin, woody branches curling like grasping fingers. Its tangled hair was interwoven with sprigs of leaves, and fresh thorns jutted from its chest. Mia's parents scolded her for the mess, but when she tried to throw the doll away, it reappeared on her bed, roots snaking across the sheets like living veins. That night, the branches crept longer, twining tightly around Mia's wrists as she slept. She awoke paralyzed, the doll's face inches from hers, its eyes now hollow, dark voids. Thorned roots burrowed into her skin, drawing blood that seeped into the wood. By sunrise, Mia's bed was empty except for the doll, now cradling a new, red-streaked bloom where her heart had once rested. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts. Have you ever looked into a mirror and felt like something was looking back? The crack in the old bathroom mirror had always bothered Leah, a jagged line splitting her face in two whenever she glanced at her reflection. Tonight, after a long, exhausting day, she splashed water on her face, trying to shake off the creeping unease that had followed her all day. When she looked up, her reflection smiled. Leah froze. She hadn't moved. The smile widened, teeth gleaming in a way her own never did. Leah blinked. So did the reflection, but not at the same time. She wanted to run, but her feet refused. Then the reflection lifted its hand, curled its fingers slowly and beckoned. And Leah, her body no longer her own, leaned closer to the mirror. The glass, cold as ice, rippled, and suddenly her world flipped. She screamed, but the sound died in her throat as she stared out from behind the glass. Her reflection, now alive, stretching in her skin, humming with a voice that wasn't hers. It ran fingers through her hair, smiled her smile. Leah pounded from inside the mirror, her breath fogged up the invisible barrier between her and everything she knew. But the mirror didn't fog up anymore. The thing on the outside had no reflection. The new Leah winked at her captive self, then walked away. And the crack down the mirror? Waiting for the next tired soul to look a little too long. And when they do, the mirror might just smile back. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts. And remember, next time you catch your reflection smiling before you do, don't blink. Did you ever hear a lullaby that makes you want to scream? They buried Grandma on a rainy Tuesday. The old piano in the parlor, her pride and joy, hadn't made a sound in years. Its lid was always closed, keys yellowed, dust clung to it like skin to bone. But tonight, at exactly midnight, when it was raining cats and dogs, a single delicate note rang out. High, hollow, wrong. I stopped halfway up the stairs, another note, then another. A lullaby. Her lullaby. The one she sang when I was 5, sick with fever, whispering it through the dark like a spell. I crept to the parlor, heart thudding. The keys were pressing themselves. Slow, deliberate. A tune played by no one. The air turned sharp and cold. My breath fogged. Shadows twitched in the corners, stretching longer with every note, as if the room itself was bending toward the sound. The room pulsed with something old, something waiting. Then the piano bench moved, dragged backward with a long, aching squeal. I saw it, fingerprints pressed into the keys. No hands, just the weight of something unseen. The lullaby slowed, each note stretched like a dying breath. Then, silence. I turned to run, but the piano spoke. A voice, gravel and honey, coiled out from its open maw. Not Grandma's voice. No, it borrowed her tone. Sleep, little one. You don't need to be awake anymore. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts. And don't forget to leave the piano lid closed and the hallway light on. What if the dead weren't resting, but screaming beneath the soil, waiting to be heard? They buried him, but something didn't stay buried. Malcolm McRae was just a name on a crumbling headstone, a Scottish immigrant who died mysteriously in 1892, but locals say he never truly left. Visitors to the cemetery report hearing whispers near his grave, soft, pleading, in a language no one can place. Others claim to see a shadowy figure wandering the rows at night, searching. Then came the investigation. A team of paranormal experts set out to debunk the legend. What did they find? Only made things worse. Their equipment spiked the second they stepped near McRae's grave. The ground trembled. Then, one of them screamed. Beneath the headstone, they discovered a hidden crypt, sealed for over a century. Inside, symbols carved into the stone, some ancient, some never seen before, and a message scratched into the wall. In fresh blood, I was buried alive. There was nobody, no coffin, just claw marks on the inside of the stone. And since then, every investigator who entered that crypt vanished. So I ask you, when you walk past a grave, how can you be sure something isn't watching you from beneath? Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts. And remember, some graves are better left unopened. What if the dead weren't the only ones lying still in the morgue? What if something else was watching from the shadows? I stepped into the morgue expecting cold silence. Instead, I was greeted by a whisper. Not from the dead, but from him, Chucky. The air was thick, not just with formaldehyde, but dread. The lights above flickered like they were scared too. I walked past empty slabs and closed body drawers until I noticed one was slightly ajar, just enough for tiny fingerprints to smear the edge. They say this place used to be safe. Now, it's a playground for something evil. Autopsy tools rattle on their own. Cold breezes sweep through sealed rooms, and sometimes you hear giggling, high-pitched and cruel. I rounded a corner. That's when I saw him, Chucky. Not on a shelf, not in a box, standing, watching. His eyes locked on mine, plastic but alive. A scalpel dangled from his tiny hand, dripping something red. I couldn't breathe. He smiled, then he moved. Fast, I turned, ran, slammed into doors, cold metal, dead ends. His footsteps, not heavy, but steady, closer, always closer. I dove through a back exit, heart exploding in my chest. Outside, I looked back. There he was, at the window, smiling. He never needed a coffin. He already made this place his home. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts, and never trust the silence in a morgue. Would you dare open a door that's been sealed shut for 60 years? She did. Emily inherited an old Victorian house from an aunt she'd never met. Everyone warned her, never go into the attic. Of course, that's exactly where she went first. The house was dead silent, the kind of silence that presses on your eardrums. She climbed the narrow stairs, flashlight trembling in her grip. At the top, she found a door, nailed shut with rusted boards and a strange, black wax seal smeared across the handle. It took her an hour to pry it open. Inside, darkness, and the cold, unnatural cold. The kind that creeps inside your bones and whispers to your spine. She found old furniture, broken dolls with missing eyes, and a trunk locked. She forced it open and found letters, dozens of them, all addressed to Emily. But they were dated 1952. They were written by a child. They were written by her. Heart racing, she read them. I don't like when he comes at night. He whispers from the walls. Aunt Mary says don't answer, but I did, and now he's inside. Emily dropped the letter. Behind her, the dolls had moved, slightly, and in the corner, the shadow of a little girl, whispering. She ran, sealed the attic, and never went back. But the letters kept appearing, one each morning, still written in her handwriting, still dated 1952. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts. And be careful what doors you open. Some were never meant to be unsealed. You ever hear your name whispered when no one else is home? It happened to Marcus. One night, just past 3 a.m., He woke up with a cold chill running down his spine. At first, he thought it was just a draft until he heard it, a whisper, right in his ear. "Marcus." He jolted upright. Nothing, just the humming silence of the night. His heart pounded. He checked his apartment, doors locked, windows shut, but as he turned to head back to bed, he heard it again. "Why did you leave me?" The voice was soft, female, broken. Marcus didn't know anyone who'd speak to him like that, but the whispers kept coming, every night, closer, angrier, more desperate. He tried sleeping with music, didn't help. He left lights on, didn't matter. He even set up a camera. What he saw chilled him to the core. At 3:03 a.m., the air in his room distorted like heat waves. And then a figure, pale, hair dripping wet, lips moving, but no sound on the footage. The next morning, Marcus finally talked to the old woman living upstairs. Her eyes widened when he described the whispers. She told him about the woman who used to live in his apartment, murdered by her fiancé who left her to die in the tub. Her last words, "Why did you leave me?" Marcus moved out that same day, but some nights, when it's quiet, he swears he still hears her voice. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts. And not all whispers are in your head. Some are trying to be heard. Have you ever heard crying from an attic that no one's lived in since 1893? I didn't believe it until I heard her myself. There's a house at the end of Rook Street, peeling paint, boarded windows, and a front door that groans like it's in pain. Locals say it watches you, follows you, chooses you. I stepped inside with my camera, heart pounding like a war drum. The air was cold, not winter cold, wrong cold. The kind that makes your breath feel heavy like something is clinging to it. Upstairs, I found her room, tiny, dusty. A child's drawing is nailed to the wall with rusty pins. A stick figure family, except the child was drawn with no face. Then I heard it, soft crying, a little girl's sobs coming from the attic. I called out, voice shaking. "Hello," no answer, just more crying. I climbed the attic stairs. Each step felt harder than the last, like the house didn't want me up there. The door was cracked open. I pushed it gently, and it slammed shut behind me. The crying stopped. Total silence. Then from the shadows, something crawled out. Not a girl. Not anymore. Her mouth hung open too wide. Her eyes were hollow, dripping black. She whispered, "Do you want to stay and play?" I ran. Fell down the stairs. The front door flung itself open as the house spat me out. I never looked back. But sometimes at night, I still hear her crying, and I haven't been able to find where it's coming from. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts. And remember, not every child's cry needs an answer. What would you do? Own phone number started texting you? Sarah's phone buzzed at 2:17 a.m., the exact time her twin died last year. She squinted at the screen, confused. One message, from her own number. "Help me." Her stomach dropped. She stared at the screen, frozen. Another text appeared. "I'm cold." She fumbled with the phone, checked the contact. It was definitely her number. Panicking now, she typed, "Who is this?" The reply came instantly. "You know me." The hallway light flickered. Shadows shifted in her quiet apartment. "What do you want?" she whispered, thumbs trembling. "Come home." She blinked. "I am home." But the next text made her blood run cold. "No, come home." Silence fell like a heavy curtain. The air grew dense. The apartment felt wrong, too quiet, too deep, like it wasn't hers anymore. Then her phone buzzed again. "Look behind you." She turned. Nothing. No, wait. The hallway stretched longer than before. A shape stood at the far end, smiling. Her phone vibrated violently. A new message. "You left me here. Now you take my place." The light snapped off. Sarah's phone slipped from her hand. The last thing she saw was her phone screen glowing with her own number calling. She tried to scream, but her voice vanished, swallowed by the silent, endless dark. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts, and remember, some calls come from the place you never escaped. What would you do if the apartment above you, the one you hear footsteps in every night, was supposed to be empty? I lived alone in a one-bedroom apartment in downtown Milwaukee. Quiet, old, nothing special, except for the footsteps upstairs. At first, I figured it was just a neighbor walking around, but it happened every night. Always after 2 a.m., heel to toe, back and forth, not random, not rushed, like someone was practicing something. Then came the knocking, 3 knocks, slow, even, too deliberate to be pipes. I asked my landlord if the guy upstairs worked nights. He blinked. No one's lived there since March. This was July. That night I turned off everything and listened. At 1:45 a.m., footsteps. I climbed on my bed, ear to the ceiling, and I heard breathing, heavy, strained, directly above me. Next day, we went up. The second he opened the door, icy air hit me. Middle of summer, but it felt like a freezer. The apartment was empty. But in the bedroom, tiny scratches in a perfect circle on the floor, like someone had walked in the same path for hours or days. That night at 3:12 a.m., 3 knocks on my door. No one was there, but the stairwell light upstairs was on, and I swear I heard someone walking. I left the next day, never went back. Months later, I checked the listing, still vacant. Maintenance issues, it said. I called. The voice paused, then whispered, "We're still trying to figure out the issue with 4th floor." Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts. And remember, some footsteps don't belong to the living. What if the device meant to protect your child was actually inviting something else in? I always thought the baby monitor picked up static, until I heard it say my name. 2 nights ago, a faint crackle at 2 a.m., I thought it was interference, maybe a neighbor's device. But last night, louder, a whisper. Clear this time. Daniel. I froze. My wife and baby were asleep. I stared at the monitor's green light blinking in the dark. Creeping to the nursery, I expected to find something wrong, but the room was still peaceful. My daughter slept soundly. I checked the windows, locked, closet, empty. Back in the hallway, the monitor flared again. He's watching now. Panic hit me. I unplugged it, ripped it from the wall, bought a new one. Top of the line. No Wi-Fi, no chance of hacking. Tonight, just after 2, it buzzed again. I held my breath. Closer, it whispered. Flashlight in hand, I walked to the nursery. The hallway felt longer than usual. Too quiet. The door creaked open. Baby still asleep, but the monitor glowed red, not green. Red. It spoke, my voice trembling. "Daniel, help me." I backed away, heart racing. The baby giggled softly, amused, not scared. I stepped forward. Then the monitor whispered, in a voice not mine, low, wet, hungry. "You should have come sooner." I rushed to the crib, empty. Only the monitor remained, whispering, "Now we have her." Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts. And remember, the static between worlds is never just noise. Would you follow your child into the dark if she said someone was calling her from a dry, abandoned well? At exactly 2:45 a.m., 8-year-old Lila opened her bedroom window and whispered into the wind, "She's cold, Mama. She wants to come up." Her parents woke to a chill in the air and the front door swinging open. Outside, small wet footprints trailed across the dew-covered grass, leading toward the edge of the woods, to the old stone well that hadn't echoed since little Abby Forsyth vanished near it 20 years ago. No body was ever found, only her doll lying beside the well, its plastic face split down the middle. As they drew closer, the silence broke with a faint, eerie melody rising from the pit. "Ring around the rosy." Lila stood at the edge, barefoot and calm, eyes fixed on the black void below. "She says I'm her best friend now," she whispered, smiling. Then the voice changed, low, raspy, inhuman. "I was alone, now I'm not." Suddenly, Lila's feet began to slide, her body pulled toward the well as if by invisible hands. Her father lunged and grabbed her just in time, yanking her back from the edge. That night, they packed nothing. They drove away and never returned. The house still stands, rotting and silent. Locals say if you pass by just before dawn, you'll hear 2 girls giggling near the well, and a voice whispering, "Wanna play?" Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts, and never listen when the well whispers back. What would you do if you lived alone and heard someone breathing right under your bed? It was past midnight when Sam finally turned off the lights. Silence wrapped around his apartment like a blanket, too still, too perfect. That's when he heard it, breathing, not his. Not from outside, it was coming from under his bed. Inhale, exhale, slow, deep, steady. He lived alone. Frozen in place, he strained to listen, hoping it was his imagination. But the sound continued, calm and rhythmic, as if someone was lying beneath him, waiting. He whispered, barely audible, "Hello?" No answer. But the breathing stopped. The silence that followed was worse. Thick, watching, waiting. Swallowing his fear, he leaned over the edge, heart thudding. The shadows under the bed stared back, empty. He laughed nervously, shook his head, sat back up, and saw a small piece of paper, sitting neatly on his pillow. His hands trembled as he picked it up. The handwriting was messy, uneven. It said, "Thanks for not looking too hard." Panic surged through his body. He jumped out from the bed, slammed the lights on. Nothing. No one. But the paper was still warm, like someone had just been there, right next to him. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts, and now sleep tight. Just don't look under the bed tonight. What if a forgotten radio station began transmitting voices that should have remained silent? WZRD 98.3 FM in Millbury, Maine died in the 80s. Its rusted tower loomed like a sentinel. 17-year-old Eli Thompson, exploring the woods, discovered the abandoned station. Drawn by the romanticism of radio's golden age, he decided to resurrect it. With help from retired electrician Mr. Grayson, the on-air sign flickered to life. Eli's voice crackled. "Good evening, Millbury. You're listening to WZRD 98.3 FM, back from the dead." Initially, broadcasts were innocent. Classic rock, local news. Then the calls began. "Is this real?" A woman trembled. "I can't find my son," another sobbed. Distorted voices, eerily familiar, people who vanished decades ago. Eli delved into archives, uncovering The Midnight Hour, a controversial program on the occult. Its host, Silas Reed, vanished during a 1983 broadcast. As Eli pieced together the mystery, broadcasts grew darker. Whispers filled the airwaves. Listeners heard voices of lost loved ones at home. One night, Eli received a call. "Eli, it's Silas. Thank you for bringing us back." The line went dead. Next morning, WZRD was silent. Eli was gone. In the studio, the on-air sign glowed faintly. A tape played on loop. "Good evening, Millbury. You're listening to 98.3 FM, where the past never dies." Residents still hear whispers on their radios late at night, even when they're turned off. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts. And remember, some ghostly stations never truly die. They just find a new voice. What if a simple reflection in the mirror could unveil your darkest fears? In the quaint town of Marble, Colorado, an antique mirror installed in the local library begins to unveil the darkest fears of its patrons. Initially a source of excitement, the mirror soon reveals its sinister nature as townsfolk experience vivid hallucinations of their deepest regrets. Margaret, the beloved librarian, is the first to succumb, seeing her deceased husband and feeling the weight of their last argument. As more townspeople gaze into the mirror, they confront their own demons. Tommy, the mechanic, relives the guilt of his best friend's death, while Mrs. Hargrove faces the ghost of her long-lost sister. The library transforms from a sanctuary into a place of dread, with the mirror thriving on their fears. Desperate to understand its power, Margaret uncovers the mirror's dark history, linked to a family plagued by tragedy. As the centennial celebration approaches, the town is on edge, culminating in Tommy's suicide, which deepens the collective despair. On the night of the celebration, the townsfolk gather to unveil the mirror, but as they confront their reflections, chaos ensues. Margaret, determined to break the mirror's hold, reaches out and shouts, "I release you." The mirror shatters, releasing the townsfolk from their fears, but the scars remain, leaving Marble forever changed, haunted by the truths that had been revealed. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts, and remember, reflections can reveal more than just your face. What would you do if a restless spirit demanded an annual offering? My aunt, Rachel Bennett, nearly 70, is haunted by a magnolia tree. Since 2001, she is living alone in a small town. In front of her house, there is a large magnolia tree with a mound beneath it. She wanted to cut it. Rumor had it that a girl was buried there, her spirit merging with the tree. One night, the intense scent of magnolia flowers filled the porch, though it wasn't blooming season. Along with the scent came whispers and rustling. Thinking it a prank, she found no one. That night, she heard footsteps around the porch. The next evening, in a power outage, she saw someone under the tree, dressed in white, long hair, only eyes visible. Terrified, she shut the door, but she felt watched through the window. A shadow appeared, but no one was there, though the magnolia scent lingered. A few nights later, she awoke at 2 a.m. to cold. Beside her bed sat a shadowy figure. It silently looked at her hand. She fainted. In the morning, she found 3 finger imprints on her hand. A local herbalist, Mrs. Sheila, revealed the tree housed a spirit. A pastor's prayers were interrupted by a storm, and he warned it was a bound entity seeking a replacement. That night, Rachel dreamed of the girl in white. She demanded 15 pounds of donuts under the tree every April. Frightened, she agreed. Since then, my aunt places donuts under the tree each April. If she doesn't, her footsteps return. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts. And remember, the darkness's demand is insatiable, and it must be appeased. What if the place you felt safest was where you should fear most? In Winthrop, Maine, the old chapel stood like a forgotten scar at the edge of town. Its steeple crooked, its doors chained shut since the fire of '82, when screams tangled with hymns and smoke curled from the roof like a dying prayer. Folks said it was empty now, just blackened pews, shattered glass, and silence thick as dust. But after her mother died, Anna felt something pulling her. Something quiet, patient, buried deep in her bones. The chain was broken when she arrived, swinging gently in a breeze that didn't touch the trees. Inside, the air was still, too still. Dust drifted through fractured light, and the silence pressed against her ears like deep water. Then came the hum, not sound but memory, and the whisper of her name. Anna. Not aloud, but inside her. Soft, familiar. Like a song from childhood she could never quite place. Shadows shifted, faces flickered in the gloom. Friends, neighbors, her mother, all with wide, pleading eyes. The chapel wasn't abandoned. It remembered, and it needed someone to listen. The air thickened. The floor throbbed beneath her like a living thing. She turned to flee, but the doors were gone. Her scream rose, then vanished into that unnatural hush. Outside, life went on, but in Winthrop, the chapel waits, and it always finds someone willing to hear what should never be heard. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts, and remember, not all silence is empty, some of it listens back. Would you cross a bridge that whispers your name? In Millfield, Maine, the old stone bridge on the edge of town was little more than a shortcut for dog walkers and late-night teens. But everyone knew the stories. In the hush of dusk, the wind carried voices, soft, insistent, like someone remembering the dead. Tom Grady, a widower nursing his grief, walked the bridge every evening. One chilly October night, as the sun bled out behind the pines, he paused. The air thickened. From beneath the arches came a low, murmuring song. Tom's heart thudded as he caught a name, his own, drifting up like a secret. Tom. He froze, rational mind fighting the primal urge to run. The whisper grew louder, more urgent, until it was a chorus chanting his name. Shadows rippled along the water. He staggered back, but the bridge seemed to stretch, stones slick and endless. Then he saw them, faces in the stone, mouths moving. One face was his late wife, eyes hollow, lips trembling. "Come home, Tom." With a scream, he turned, fleeing. But as he reached the far side, he realized the whisper had followed him. It never left. In Millfield, once the bridge knows your name, you never truly leave. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts, and remember, not all bridges lead you home. Some drag you back. What if your imaginary friend came back, but remembered things differently than you do? When Mark Renshaw returned to Dagger Creek after 20 years to bury his mother, he thought he'd left his childhood ghosts behind. But the first night in the old house, he heard scratching from the cellar, the one that was nailed shut when he was 10. Mark found it just as he left it. Dust, toys, and in the corner, a small wooden chair. Occupied. "Hi, Marky," said the pale boy with glossy black eyes. It was Jamie, his imaginary friend. Only Mark hadn't imagined him. Jamie had simply appeared one summer, and every time Jamie showed up, something bad happened. A kid went missing, a neighbor's house burned down. Accidents, they said, but Jamie always smiled. Terrified, Mark fled to the local diner, where old Evelyn Poe poured him coffee and said, "Jamie's been here a long time. He belongs to Dagger Creek." That night, Jamie returned. Not running, appearing, shadows bled down the stairs. "You forgot our game," Jamie whispered. "But I remember." Mark screamed and everything went black. He woke up in the cellar, paralyzed. Jamie stood before him, wearing his face. "I always wanted to be real," Jamie said, smiling. "Now you're the imaginary one." In Dagger Creek, a guy named Jamie Renshaw just moved in. He looks like Mark, talks like Mark, and whispers to children in closets. Let's play a game. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts. And remember, sometimes the scariest ghosts are the ones we created ourselves. What if you woke up in your childhood home and found a door that wasn't there the day before? Stan moved back to Hollow Creek to care for his dying mother. After she passed, he stayed. Out of guilt, maybe. Out of habit. One morning, he noticed something strange. A door. In the upstairs hallway that had never been there. Narrow, white-trimmed, wedged between his old bedroom and the linen closet. He knew this house by heart. That door did not exist yesterday. When he asked around, neighbors just gave him odd smiles. "Thought you remembered," the mailman said. Then the knocking started, always after midnight. First soft, then louder. One night, Stan opened it. Inside was only darkness and a sound. A child is crying. His own voice. He slammed it shut, but the memories returned. Daisy, his childhood dog. The day he pushed her down the stairs, the yelp, the silence. His father was yelling. Stan visited Mrs. Belanger at the bookstore. She just shook her head. That door shows up for people who bury things. It wants you to remember. The next morning, the hallway was gone. Just the door. Endless black behind it. Cold, whispering with every wrong thing he'd ever done. No one's seen Stan since. The house stands empty, but late at night, people still hear knocking. And sometimes, when a resident of Hollow Creek has something dark in their past, they wake up to a door that wasn't there yesterday. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts. And remember, sometimes the house remembers what you'd rather forget. What if you found a handmade figure on your porch, carved from old wood, its features eerily familiar? In the quiet town of Millfield, everyone knew each other's secrets, or so they believed. Martha, the widowed librarian, was the first to spot the tiny figure on her doorstep. It grinned with her own crooked smile and clutched a miniature book. At first, she thought it quaint. By dusk, every home had one, and each doll was an unsettling mirror, twisted to reveal something only its owner knew. The sheriff's doll wore a blood-stained badge. The preachers clutched a flask. A schoolteacher's held a broken wedding ring. Whispers spread like wildfire. Locks were changed. Windows shuttered. Paranoia bloomed in silence. At midnight, Martha's doll moved just an inch closer. She locked it in a drawer, but it reappeared on her nightstand, its wooden eyes glinting with quiet accusation. The next day, she found 3 more, stacked neatly on her kitchen table, all smiling. Soon the dolls began to multiply, crowding rooms, suffocating secrets into the open. People panicked, families turned on each other, fires were lit, but the dolls never burned. They only reappeared. By week's end, the town was silent. Every house stood empty, save for rows of handcrafted figures, each one grinning, each one watching. The toy maker's shop never reopened. But on cold, windless nights, beneath a pale moon, you can still hear laughter, wooden and hollow, echoing through the streets of Millfield. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts. And be careful what you carve. It might carve back. What if the light meant to guide you home was only there to reveal your darkest sins? In Greystone Hollow, the townsfolk clung to their routines, their secrets tucked away like moth-eaten quilts. Every evening, old Mrs. Pritchard lit the iron lantern in the town square, its golden glow pushing back the creeping dark. One mist-heavy night, Ben Harper, a man worn down by grief and half-drunk on regret, staggered toward that familiar glow. But as he approached, the lantern flickered, and the shadows began to shift, moving as if alive. Faces emerged, warped, familiar, wrong. His father's ghost appeared first, dead these 10 years, his mouth twisted in silent blame. Then Clara from the bakery, her hollow eyes mouthing secrets Ben thought long buried. The light grew harsh, no longer comforting but accusatory, illuminating the faces of everyone he'd lied to, cheated, or failed. Ben tried to back away, but the shadows bled into the cobblestones and reached for him, pulling him toward the truth he could no longer outrun. He screamed once, sharp and brief, before the fog swallowed it. By morning, the lantern still burned, steady and silent, but Ben was gone. All that remained was his shadow, etched into the stone as if scorched there by judgment itself. A passerby later claimed to hear whispers rising from the square, a chorus of names and regrets. No one spoke of it again, yet no one stepped too close after dark. And still, every night, the lantern flickers, waiting. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts. And remember, some lights don't guide, they judge. What if you got a voicemail from your future self, warning you not to go to work, only to realize you were already there? Dan Carver, a quiet divorcee in the dead-end town of Ellsworth, clocked into his headset job at Line Tech like every other Wednesday. At 10:14 a.m., his phone buzzed, voicemail. His own voice, older, trembling, begged, "Don't sit at line 17, please. For the love of God, don't." But he already had. He glanced around, the same gray cubicles, the same fluorescent hum. Shrugging, he slipped the headset on. The phones died, not just his, all of them. Then came the breathing, wet labored through the line. "You didn't listen," his voice whispered again. The office warped. Coworkers twitched and convulsed, mouths replacing eyes, tongues flickering where chins should be. Mel, his boss, staggered out, his torso bent backward, speaking from a mouth blooming from his chest. Dan ran, burst through the emergency exit, found himself back at his cubicle, again and again. Each loop more grotesque, walls bleeding, desks pulsing like organs, screams rising from inside the phones. Then, blackness. He awoke in his car. 10:13 a.m. Line tech loomed in the rear view. Since then, every Wednesday, 10:14, same voicemail, more desperate, more decayed. He's changed numbers, burned phones, moved states, overdosed, jumped. Each time, he wakes in that car, outside that factory. The factory stands still, waiting, and line 17 always has a seat open. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts. And remember, some warnings don't come to save you. They come to trap you forever. What would you do if your small town's quiet routine was shattered by a voice you knew could never belong to the living? In Sheffield, life was simple. Neighbors waving, the bakery smell in the air, and the church bell marking time. Tom, a mechanic haunted by his wife leaving last year and the loss of his daughter Lily, who vanished in the nearby woods 2 years ago, lived with that pain every day. One evening, after fixing Mrs. Harper's old radio, she called trembling, saying the radio played a message. "Tom, don't look outside." Outside, the town was deathly silent. No dogs, no cars, just the wind. Then came a child's laughter. The same laughter Lily had, clear and haunting, drifting from the woods. Tom's heart froze as he stepped toward the trees, the air growing cold and heavy, shadows reaching like fingers. Suddenly, Lily appeared, pale, with hollow eyes beckoning him, whispering, "Come find me, Dad." Behind her, the trees twisted into grotesque faces frozen in silent screams. He tried to run, but his feet failed him. Her smile, too wide and wrong, was the last thing he saw before darkness claimed them both. Now the town whispers about a ghost in the woods, but no one wonders why the laughter echoes at night or why the trees seem to watch. And Tom? He's still trapped there, waiting to be found. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts, and remember, some secrets aren't buried, they wait, and they always want company. What would you do if your best friend vanished at your town's festival, and no one remembered her? That's exactly what happened to me, in a tiny town where everyone knows your name. Anna and I were at the Harvest Festival, laughing and sharing caramel apples, when she suddenly slipped away into the crowd like a shadow. I called her name, pushed through the throng, but no one had seen her leave. Strangers, old neighbors, even the sheriff, all denied ever knowing anyone named Anna. It was as if she had never existed, like she was erased from everyone's memories except mine. Days passed in a haze of fear and confusion, my mind unraveling as I struggled to hold on to the fragments of our friendship. Then, beneath the loose floorboard in my childhood room, I found her journal. Pages filled with frantic handwriting revealing a horrifying truth. Decades ago, the townsfolk made a dark pact, sacrificing the memories of outsiders to keep an ancient evil sealed deep in the woods beyond Millbrook. Anna had stumbled onto the secret, and the town's silence was their way of erasing her from existence, along with anyone who dared remember her. The last entry was a chilling warning. If you remember, you're next. That night, as I stared into my bedroom mirror, her reflection flickered for a brief second before dissolving into nothingness. Now, I question my own reality. Am I still part of this world, or am I next to be forgotten? Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts. And remember, some friends disappear for a reason. Don't be the next. What if your child told you someone was whispering to them through the storm drain? Marla Hensley thought her son Jonah was imagining things, until he said the voice knew her name too. In the fog-drenched town of Ashford Hollow, where smiles feel staged and every crack in the pavement seems to breathe, whispers from the drains aren't new, they're just ignored. Jonah grew pale, sleepwalking to the curb each night, mouthing words no child should know. One stormy evening, Marla followed and saw it. A hand, gray and wet, reaching through the grate, fingers too long, nails clicking like teeth. The next day, the townspeople avoided her eyes. Sheriff Dalton whispered one word before hanging himself: the heart. Desperate, Marla broke into the town archives and found an old sewer map. Beneath the streets lay a hidden chamber, marked in red. She took Jonah down there. Beneath rusted ladders and dripping concrete, they found it. A pulsing mass of flesh, bone and iron, stitched with the faces of the missing, including her husband's. It crooned to Jonah, calling him home. Marla fled with her son, but the town has grown quieter since. Doors close faster. More children are missing. Jonah doesn't speak anymore. And when it rains, the drains don't gurgle, they whisper. In Ashford Hollow, the past isn't buried, it breathes. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts. And remember, what you ignore beneath you doesn't disappear. It just waits until you're alone. What would you do if the ground beneath your feet started whispering your name? On Maple Street, folks always said the past stayed buried, locked away beneath cracked pavement and fading memories. But last Thursday, when rain hammered the worn asphalt, the earth began to split, and something ancient clawed its way up. Ben, a tired mechanic drowning in regrets and whiskey, heard the first voice as he locked his shop. It was his father's, gone 20 years, calling for help, then accusing, then laughing like a ghost unchained. The next morning, neighbors found deep claw marks gouged into their lawns, muddy footprints circling their beds. Children woke screaming, pale and trembling, mumbling about hollow eyes watching from the floorboards. That night, streetlights flickered and died. The doors unlocked themselves. Radios played static, shaped like voices. The town gathered, shovels in hand, desperate to fill the holes, praying to bury the past again. But each night, the whispers grew louder, the ground softer, as if the earth itself was breathing. Ben, driven by guilt and terror, followed the voices into the black. He vanished. By dawn, only his boots remained, heels sunk deep, as if something had dragged him down. Now Maple Street is abandoned, its houses sagging, its silence broken only by pleading voices rising from below, begging not to be forgotten. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts. And remember, not all echoes fade, some claw their way back up. What if the lantern at your town's festival never went out, no matter what? In Plainfield, every October, families gather as Old Man Harper lights the lantern in the square, a tradition said to bring good fortune. It's burned without fail for 100 years, casting a golden glow over cider stands, hay rides, and the scent of pumpkin pies. But this year, Sarah stands apart, heart heavy with the memory of her brother Jacob, who vanished the night of the last festival. No one saw him leave, no trace was found, and no one seemed to care. Tonight, the light feels wrong, too bright, too alive. A whisper coils around her like smoke, soft and insistent, calling her by name. She follows it past laughing children and smiling neighbors whose expressions don't quite reach their eyes. The lantern pulses as she nears, and in its glow the truth reveals itself. Faces distort, eyes sink into shadow, and the townsfolk's smiles stretch too wide, too hollow. They are shells, drained of what once made them human. The light flickers, and in it she sees Jacob, his face pale, mouth open in a silent scream, trapped inside the flame. Panic grips her, but before she can move, Harper's gnarled hand clamps her shoulder. "It needs someone new," he rasps, voice crackling like firewood. Sarah tries to scream, but the lantern swells, devouring sound and soul alike. At dawn, the town wakes to celebration. No one speaks of Sarah. The lantern burns on, brighter, hungrier, eternal. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts. And remember, some festivals celebrate the living, others feed on them. What if you saw blood dripping from a flower, and it whispered your name? In 2008, Eva, a teenager, visited her grandparents' remote Tennessee home for summer break. The old house stood near a towering hibiscus tree, locals called the Blood Blossom, named for its deep red flowers and the chilling legends surrounding it. Stories told of a ghostly woman in white who appeared by the rusted water pump beneath the tree on full moon nights, her cries echoing through the still air. Eva never believed the tales, until one dark night when she and her cousin heard the pump creak as if someone was drawing water, though the yard was empty. As they approached, the tree's branches swayed violently despite no breeze, and a blood-stained flower dropped at Eva's feet. Frozen with fear, they retreated inside, but the terror did not end. Footsteps paced outside Eva's bedroom door, soft knocks rattled the frame, and a pale, dirt-smudged foot briefly appeared under the door before vanishing. Her uncle finally revealed the truth. The tree was cursed, haunted by a bride who poisoned herself there 30 years prior after her husband abandoned her at the altar, leaving her to die alone by the pump. One night, Eva caught sight of the woman in white outside her window, head bowed with blood dripping down her neck, staring silently from beneath the cursed tree. Heart pounding, Eva fled the next morning and never returned, but the blood blossoms haunting remained. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts. And remember, some ghosts never rest, and some wounds never heal. What if the woods behind your quiet town held a secret so deep it swallowed people whole? In Willow Creek, folks knew never to cross Miller's fence after dark. It wasn't law, it was survival. But when Edna's boy vanished, and then old Mr. Carter, Sheriff Lane couldn't ignore the whispers. He entered the woods alone, fog curling at his boots, flashlight flickering like it feared what lay ahead. The trees grew dense, air heavy with rot and silence. Then he saw it, a hole in the earth, gaping and black, rimmed with claw marks as if the ground had been torn open from below. Something cold brushed his neck. He called out, but only silence answered, until a voice, faint and cracking, Edna's boy, begging from below. Lane dropped to his knees, shone his light into the pit. Faces looked back, pale, wide-eyed, pressed behind thin, moving layers of dirt. "Help us," one mouthed. He reached in. Roots or fingers wrapped around his wrist, rough and strong. He pulled back, but they tightened. The ground shuddered, soil shifted. The pit groaned like a living thing. Lane screamed, but the woods swallowed it. His flashlight dropped, beams spinning into blackness. Then nothing. The hole was sealed, leaving behind only disturbed leaves and stillness. But that night, whispers crept through the town, hollow voices threading through window cracks, and every mirror in Willow Creek fogged over from the inside. The pit, they say, is growing. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts. And remember, some calls from the earth should never be answered. What would you do if a deadly spirit has a claim on the farm you just moved in? Emily, a young newlywed woman, moved to her husband's family farm in a small Midwestern town. She was adjusting to life on the farm, which had a modest herd of cattle, some chickens, and enough land to keep busy. The farm had a well and a pond used to water livestock. After 2 cows died mysteriously, Emily's husband left to get a vet while she stayed to care for the animals. One hot afternoon, Emily felt drawn to the pond despite the heat and saw a terrifying creature. A tall, hairy figure with a dog-like face and only one leg, tapping a stick rhythmically on the ground. The creature's twisted grin and snarling face filled her with dread. As it advanced, Emily ran, praying, but the tapping followed. Exhausted, she stumbled, and the creature grabbed a fistful of her hair, nearly making her faint. She broke free, bleeding, and collapsed inside. After waking, she told her mother-in-law, who called a pastor to bless the land and warn them away from the pond. Weeks later, Emily and her sister-in-law saw the figure again near the well, which was dry and held a dead dog. They were urged to avoid the area. Emily heard barking behind her and saw the creature again, but refused to look back. Though it appeared several more times, it never harmed her again, leaving a haunting memory of that strange figure by the pond. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts, and remember, some ponds weren't meant to be stared into. What if the abandoned church you're restoring suddenly unleashed something hungry for blood? In a decaying neighborhood of a dying city stood an old Episcopalian church, built around 1903. Its massive oak doors sealed with a rusted iron lock, untouched for decades. Tall stone walls topped with broken glass enclosed the property, giving it a grim fortress-like feel. Commissioned by a wealthy industrial family, who mysteriously vanished after their governess reportedly committed suicide inside, the church remained closed until descendants returned in 1974. Eleanor, a historian, and her professor husband came to assess it for restoration. On the first 2 nights, Eleanor heard muffled chanting seeping through the walls. On the 3rd night, driven by dread, she found the sanctuary's padlock mysteriously clicking open. Inside, pale figures in white robes knelt chanting, "Set free the denizens of hell, we crave human blood. Mother of sorrows, grant us release." Suddenly, their forms twisted into grotesque, towering beings with burnt, decayed flesh, long limbs, and jagged teeth, tearing into two children. Frozen with fear, Eleanor screamed as they lunged at her. Her husband awoke, rushing in to find her dragged by an unseen force. Fighting, he freed her, and they fled to their room. Eleanor coughed up blood, trembling as dawn broke and the oppressive evil lifted. Terrified, they barricaded the door and left the cursed church, vowing never to return. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts. And remember, evil doesn't rest, even when the church is closed. What would you do if a simple white cat crossing your path wasn't just a cat, but a vengeful spirit watching your every move? Jake never saw a ghost or spirit, but he believed in the supernatural after an incident with his Uncle Tom during a summer visit to their remote farmhouse in rural Kentucky. One night around 11 p.m., Tom was riding his motorcycle home on a seldom-used shortcut called Old Hollow Road, shaded by ancient oaks. Suddenly, a white cat jumped into his headlight beam. Startled, Tom flicked the cat off the road and continued. A few miles later, the cat reappeared, but Tom ignored it. That night, Tom dreamed of the cat crying in an eerie voice. Awake, he heard the same cries from beneath his bed, growing into angry growls. Peering under, he saw two glowing eyes filled with sadness and rage. Suddenly, a cold hand grabbed his wrist and pulled him under the bed, and he lost consciousness. In the morning, villagers found Tom unconscious with deep claw-like scratches. A local pastor said the white cat was a fey spirit offended when Tom threw it off the bike. Though it could have harmed him worse, it spared him but haunted him until Tom accepted a protective charm. Once, when Tom forgot the charm, the cat appeared again in his dreams, crying hauntingly. After Tom wore the charm again, the nightmares stopped and the cat vanished. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts. And remember, not every animal crossing your path is just a stray. What would you do if a smiling stranger left you scarred forever? During spring break 2024, Ethan visited his aunt in a quiet upstate New York town he hadn't seen since childhood. Restless, he went out exploring but soon realized he was lost. As darkness fell and the streets emptied, panic set in. Then he heard footsteps. A woman in her 30s appeared, one eye cloudy and white. She asked what he was doing out so late, and when he explained, she offered to guide him back, saying she was headed that way. With no better option, he followed. They walked silently until reaching a clearing near a river. The air grew cold. Suddenly, the woman let out a chilling laugh. Ethan turned to find her grinning grotesquely, face twisted beyond human. Before he could react, she shoved him to the ground. A searing pain hit his neck like fire. He screamed. From the riverbank, fishermen preparing to launch their boat called out and rushed over with flashlights. As they approached, Ethan heard the woman whisper, "You got lucky tonight." The men found him shaking, clothes singed, neck burned. He explained what happened, and they told him he'd wandered near the ruins of an old funeral home, long abandoned and rumored to be cursed. They drove him home. Days later, he grew ill, losing weight and sleep. Most terrifying of all, at night, a voice began calling his name from outside. And though he eventually recovered, the burn on his neck remained, and so did the whispers. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts, and remember, not every guide means to lead you home. What would you do if, walking home late at night, you found a glowing golden pot that shouldn't be there, and it started to float? In 2000, during Christmas, John, a middle-aged factory worker in rural Alabama, biked home nightly around 3 a.m. after his shift, crossing a rickety old wooden bridge over a dry creek surrounded by dense woods. One moonlit night, he spotted a golden pot on the bridge, gleaming unnaturally. Curious, he poked it with a stick. It rose into the air silently. Horrified, he dropped the stick and fled, hearing whispers and rustling in the dark. At a clearing, a dozen wild boars stood eerily still in the road, eyes reflecting moonlight. After a whispered prayer, they vanished. Near home, by a bamboo grove, he saw a woman in white perched high atop a stalk, unmoving, face obscured but staring straight at him. He screamed and passed out on his porch, burning with fever for days. When he recovered, he shared what he saw. His mother called a pastor who blessed the house. John never saw the pot again. Years later, he learned of the creek's dark reputation, of a shapeshifter spirit using illusions like a golden pot or weeping child to lure victims into madness or worse. Though the bridge is gone, truckers still report glimpses of a golden glimmer near that stretch of road, vanishing before they can get close. The pot still waits. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts. And remember, some spirits lure with light, but bring only shadows. What if the pale girl your sister saw at 3 a.m. wasn't outside anymore? Megan shared a bedroom with her older sister Sierra, a high school sophomore who had become obsessed with late-night studying. Her desk sat by the window, and she often stayed up past 3 a.m. One morning, Sierra casually mentioned seeing a girl on the rooftop across the street, pale, with long dark hair, just standing there around 3 a.m. Their mother blamed stress and warned her to keep the window shut, but Sierra left it cracked open night after night. One night, Megan looked out and saw the girl too, pale and still. When Sierra saw her, the girl smiled crookedly, and Sierra slammed the window shut. Later that night, Megan awoke to see a towering figure through the cracked door, its head nearly brushing the ceiling. It crept into the room like a spider, limbs unnaturally bent, crawling to Sierra's desk. Megan froze in terror, unable to scream. When she looked at Sierra, her face was twisted, tongue hanging out, eyes wide and lifeless. The creature climbed onto Megan, searing her skin with clawed hands. Just as panic overtook her, a neighbor's early alarm rang out for the pre-dawn prayer, and their mother's footsteps approached. Instantly, the figure vanished. Megan bolted into her mother's arms sobbing, but the room was empty. Her mother said it was just a dream, but Megan's skin still burned. If it was just a nightmare, why did the pain remain? Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts. And remember, some windows should never be left open at night. What would you do if your power went out, only to find out it never should have been on in the first place? Claire's cottage in Willow Bend was a peaceful haven, fireplace glowing, tea steaming, rain tapping on windows. She'd moved here to write, surrounded by forest and quiet. But then she noticed a flickering light in the woods. At first, she thought it was a hiker, but it came back the next night, closer. Then came a knock at 2 a.m. No one was there, but her doormat was flipped. Uneasy, she began locking every door before sunset, her fingers trembling more each night. One morning, she hiked into the woods and found a wooden box. Inside, a half-melted candle and a note. One light left. Do not let it go out. The wax was still warm, as if someone had just closed the lid. That night, the power failed at 1:47 a.m. Claire, panicked, lit the candle. The strange sounds stopped. Silence returned. Even the rain quieted, like the world held its breath. Morning brought relief. The light outside was gone. It was over. She opened windows, breathed the fresh air, and sipped tea that finally tasted right. Then came the call. Power was out all night, the man from the utility company said. But your meter shows electricity from midnight to 1:47. Claire's breath caught. She hadn't had power. Her skin prickled cold. She turned to the window. In daylight, just beyond the trees, stood a figure. Still, silent. Its face was smooth, unnatural. In its hand, a match, unlit. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts. And remember, not every light keeps the darkness out. What would you do if a box whispered it wanted your blood? When Nina's mother brought home an antique wooden box from a flea market, she thought it was just a charming relic. Intricately carved and likely from the Civil War era, it seemed perfect for the mantle. But from the moment it entered the house, things changed. Within days, Nina's mother heard scratching from inside. Nina opened the box and found it swarming with black ants, despite being dry and empty. That night, her father had red bite marks on his neck. The next morning, a trail of blood-smeared ants appeared on the hallway wall, forming what looked disturbingly like a face. One night, her mother screamed awake, claiming the box whispered, "You trapped me. Now I'll drink your blood." From then on, her health rapidly declined. Their housekeeper recognized the box. It belonged to a root worker from Swamp Creek, she said. Her daughter found a severed finger inside it and died the next day. Several attempts to destroy the box failed. A foul, rotting smell clung to it. Then one night, Nina woke with ants crawling across her chest. She fled, returning to find the box open and her bedroom walls smeared in blood-red letters. "No one traps me and lives." They finally burned the box after soaking it in lighter fluid 3 times. In the flames, Nina saw a woman's face watching. Even now, her mother sometimes whispers in her sleep, They're coming. They want my body. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts. And remember, fire may burn the wood, but not the spirit inside it. What would you do if your baby disappeared from the cradle, and a whisper from the darkness saying, "I've taken him"? Maria and her husband Mike bought an old house in a quiet town to raise their son Ethan away from city chaos. At first, all seemed peaceful, but soon Maria noticed strange things. Whispers at night, windows mysteriously open, and Ethan giggling alone in his cradle. One morning, she found tiny wet footprints in the dark basement, like Ethan's, though no one else was home. Neighbors hinted the house was cursed after a child vanished years ago. One night, the baby monitor crackled with a soft, eerie voice saying, "Don't worry, I put Ethan back to sleep." Rushing to his room, Maria found the cradle empty and a cold breeze blowing through an open window. Suddenly, a whisper asked why she was so worried, but no one was there. Seeing a shadow in the mirror beckoning her, Maria followed the sound of Ethan's cries to the basement, where a dark figure sat rocking the cradle, claiming Ethan was his and demanding Maria play a game to win her son back. She stepped through a mirror into a nightmare realm. Blood-red skies, broken toys underfoot, and faceless shadows trying to trap her. After a desperate chase, she found Ethan surrounded by a black vortex. Summoning all her strength, she grabbed him, shattered the darkness with a scream, and came back to reality. But the darkness whispered, "You won today, but the game is far from over." Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts, and beware the quiet places where forgotten whispers still linger. What would you do if, on a midnight train ride, a ghost appeared asking for a seat that no one else can take? In 1984, on a dark October night, a passenger train traveled from a small town near New Orleans to Baton Rouge. John, a railroad conductor, was on duty in the last car, nearly empty and cloaked in eerie silence. At 10:30 p.m., just after leaving a small station, the engine's whistle suddenly changed, harsh and mocking like a growling dog. The door creaked open, and an old woman dressed in white with a shawl over her head entered, clutching a worn red bag. She sat silently by the window. John asked for her ticket. She handed him a damp, torn death certificate dated October 4th, 1974, the day a woman died in a brutal accident on this route, struck and dismembered by a car. John stared in shock as the woman lifted her face, no eyes, flesh melting, voice like broken clock gears ticking, and whispered, "Seat number 12 is mine. No one else can take it." Suddenly, she vanished through the window, the door slammed shut, and her red bag floated away. The train abruptly stopped, though no brakes were applied. Investigators later found the train had halted exactly at the accident site. The man in seat 12 collapsed and died of a heart attack within a week. Since then, seat 12 remains unassigned. Travelers on dark moon nights say they see a woman in white by the window, raising her hand and whispering, "Is seat number 12 free?" Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts, and remember, some seats are better left empty. What if the family portrait hanging in your hallway started changing every night, revealing secrets no one dared speak aloud? In the tight-knit town of Afton, everyone knew everyone, and everyone kept their skeletons tucked away. For Annie Harper, the portrait was just another relic in her grandmother's house, until the night she saw her father's reflection standing apart, eyes hollow, clutching a blood-stained shovel. The next night, her mother's image shifted, a bruised face barely visible behind a curtain. Annie's heart pounded as each evening brought new horrors. Neighbors in the background, faces twisted in guilt, a child's hand reaching from the shadows. She tried to warn her parents, but they dismissed it as her wild imagination. One stormy night, Annie watched the portrait morph in real time, townsfolk gathering around a shallow grave. She recognized every face, hers among them, weeping. The door creaked open behind her. Cold breath tickled her neck. She spun, but the room was empty. The portrait now showed only the grave, freshly turned. And as she stared, the earth in the painting began to move. Dirt shifted slowly, as if stirred from beneath, and pale fingertips began to emerge, scraping against the painted soil. The air around her grew colder, thick with rot and old whispers. She stepped back, heart thudding, but her feet felt anchored. A low hum echoed through the walls, chanting, almost, and in the frame, something was crawling out. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts. And remember, some secrets are better left buried. What if the street lamp outside your home didn't keep you safe, but instead marked you for something far worse? Wallace was the kind of town where everyone knew your birthday, your dog's name, and your secrets. Except for the one secret no one dared speak aloud. Every night at exactly 2:13 a.m., the old street lamp on the corner flickered on, casting a sickly, stuttering glow that seemed to breathe with a life of its own. Folks whispered that anyone caught in its light would lose a piece of themselves, memories, feelings, even parts of their soul. Last night, Tom Grady stumbled beneath it after closing the hardware store. He remembered his name, but not his wife's face. The next night, he forgot his childhood. The third, he woke screaming, unable to recall the shape of his own hands. Desperate, Tom begged his neighbors for help, but no one could remember why they feared the lamp, only that they did. When Tom's hollow eyes finally vanished into the shadows, the town's memories grew lighter, emptier, as if something was feeding on their very essence. The lamp still flickers, hungry for more. So, if you ever find yourself on Wallace after midnight, don't look at the light. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts. And remember, some shadows are better left unlit. What would you do if the doll your child found is an unrested soul? Ron and his young daughter Amy moved into an old but affordable apartment with a dark, musty storage closet beneath the roof stairs. On her first day, Amy found a strange old doll there, worn pale face, faded red dress, and a crooked smile, and called it her new friend. That night, Amy vanished from her bed. Searching frantically, Ron found the closet door open, whispers drifting out. Inside, Amy sat hugging the doll, whose eyes oozed thick black liquid. The air turned icy, shadows shifted, and the doll moved on its own, gripping a sharp glass shard with a twisted grin. Ron pulled Amy away, but the doll's broken voice begged, "Don't leave me, you're mine forever." Amy cried all night, terrified the doll would take them both. The next day, Ron trapped the doll in a bag and hid it in a trash bin on the roof. That night, whispers called from the bin, and Amy sleepwalked to the roof, eyes blank, smiling hollowly. Ron found the bin open, the doll back in Amy's arms, but its face was now that of a rotting dead child, bleeding and cracked. Amy was silent, staring blankly as shadows spread and the rooftop lights died. A chilling voice whispered to Ron, "You will be my father forever." The bin slammed shut, muffled cries and eerie laughter echoing. No one ever returned to that apartment, but late at night, the doll's haunting laughter still drifts through the air. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts. And remember, not every doll is meant to be a child's companion. What if one night you woke up to find a ghostly shadow standing at your window, whispering that you now belong to it? Mary, a 12-year-old from Vermont, visited her uncle's old farmhouse in upstate New York, where behind the house lay a broken pond with smooth green stones and an ancient well, rumored to be haunted by the Emerald Spirit, a restless female ghost tied to stolen jewelry buried there. Despite warnings, Mary wandered near the well at twilight and heard a strange haunting voice calling her name from within. That night, she awoke to a pale, eyeless shadow by her window, wearing a glowing emerald bracelet, whispering that she now belonged to it. Found unconscious the next morning with claw marks on her skin, Mary muttered only, "Emerald," repeatedly. The spirit's grip worsened the following night when she sleepwalked outside, blood-stained and trembling, drawn to the glowing emerald stone floating on the pond's surface. An icy voice warned her not to scream, for no one could save her. Her uncle pulled her back inside just in time, but her cold, unblinking eyes whispered of the spirit's return. Though a spiritual healer performed rituals to cleanse her, Mary knew the spirit was only dormant. At night, her reflection sometimes vanished, replaced by the emerald shadow waiting by the well, destined to claim her completely one day. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts. And remember, some wells hide more than just water. They drown souls. What if your job took you inside an abandoned slaughterhouse and the walls whispered, "Who slit my throat?" Sean Daniels landed a renovation job on an abandoned slaughterhouse near Stillwater. Locals warned him not to stay after dark, calling the place cursed, but Sean dismissed it as superstition. On the second day, one worker heard a girl crying inside the building, and another collapsed, foaming at the mouth with no medical explanation. Determined to meet his deadline, Sean stayed late on the fourth night with his assistant and 3 workers. As night fell, the air turned unnaturally cold, the generator buzzed low, and an eerie silence blanketed the site. While retrieving tools inside, Sean saw a red light glowing from a back room. Then it vanished, revealing the words, "Get out! This is my place," scratched into the wall. Moments later, his assistant Rick screamed, claiming he saw a woman with long black hair, lidless eyes, and the face of a skinned cow staring at him. Suddenly, the generator died, and a chilling voice echoed from the dark, weeping, "Who slit my throat?" Terrified, the crew fled. A local reverend revealed the place had once been used for killings, and a missing teenage girl's headless body was found nearby. No one was ever charged. Since then, her spirit was said to haunt the site, seeking vengeance. The next morning, Sean shut the project down for good. But sometimes even now, he swears he still hears her whisper in the dark. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts. And remember, sometimes the dead don't rest until they're heard. What if the house you just bought came with a restless ghost that won't let you sleep? In rural Georgia, a home sat beside an old, abandoned cemetery. Despite warnings of strange noises and neighbors fleeing, a stubborn man bought the house cheap. At first, all seemed well until his youngest son, Abby, claimed an old woman visited him nightly, telling stories and frightening him by covering his mouth so he couldn't breathe. The family dismissed it until one night, the older sibling saw a ghostly elderly woman sitting beside Abby with her hand on his throat. Their housekeeper shared chilling tales of a woman who dug graves in the cemetery and once abducted a girl found near an empty grave with her throat torn. The incidents escalated. Mother fainted, father fired at a shadowy figure, leaving a fresh hole in the ground. A spiritual healer was called, revealing the father had unknowingly activated a summoning spell disguised as a protection charm, calling forth a restless old woman who loved digging up her own grave. During a ritual, an upside-down handprint appeared on the wall, and Abby collapsed, possessed by a harsh female voice declaring, "I was called here, now I will stay." The healer warned the spirit couldn't be banished, only contained. The family was urged to sell the house quickly and moved within a month. Years later, the older sibling still wakes to mist at the window and hears the old voice whispering, "You called me, I came, now how do I leave?" Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts. And beware, some houses come with unwelcome guests. In the heart of Maple Hollow, a town so small everyone thought they knew everyone's secrets, or believed they did, Ellie stumbled upon a yellowed envelope in her late grandmother's attic. Hidden beneath rotting floorboards and wrapped in brittle lace, it was sealed with wax long cracked and marked in trembling script, "Do not open." But curiosity has teeth. She hesitated, heart pounding, fingers trembling. "It's probably just some old family drama," she whispered to the dust. Then she broke the seal. Inside, a fragile letter, ink blurred with age. A voice spoke from the page. In 1823, our founders struck a pact beneath the ash tree, a sacrifice of silence, a lie shared and sealed, to keep the hollow safe from what stirred beneath. Feed it your shame, your secrets, and it will sleep. But should truth shine where it shouldn't, it will wake. Ellie laughed. What, some old ghost story? That night, whispers coiled around her bed. You read it. Shadows no longer obeyed the light. The next morning, neighbors refused to meet her eyes. Her mother clutched a rosary she hadn't held in years, tears streaking her face. "You shouldn't have opened it," she croaked. "Now it knows your name." As days passed, Ellie's reflection dimmed. Her voice was a breath against silence. The shadows called her softly. "Come feed us." The town had fed the hollow with silence for generations. The letter was not a warning. It was a trigger. Now the debt is due, and Ellie is the offering. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts, and remember, some secrets keep themselves for a reason. What would you do if you looked in your store's mirror and saw someone staring back who wasn't you? Monica, a 25-year-old boutique owner in a small American town, never believed in the supernatural until she bought an old, ornate mirror from an antique shop at half price. After hanging it in her store, strange things began. One night, after locking up, she saw a figure standing in the mirror despite the shop being empty and locked. Scratch marks appeared on the glass, and late one evening during a blackout, the mirror reflected a pale girl in white with empty eyes and a faint smile, who whispered, "Why did you take my place?" Monica's reflection started acting independently, blinking differently, smiling eerily, driving her toward madness. Desperate for answers, she learned the mirror once belonged to Ruth, a makeup artist who had hanged herself in front of it after a client vanished mysteriously. Determined to end the nightmare, Monica smashed the mirror at midnight, but not before the ghostly girl warned her, "If you break me, I'll be free, but you won't survive it." The shattered glass marked Monica's collapse, and though doctors blamed trauma, she still hears the woman's scream. Now she avoids mirrors, knowing some don't just reflect, they trap souls inside. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts, and remember, some reflections hide more than just your image. What if the peaceful house you just moved into hid a dark secret that only revealed itself when you were completely alone? After moving to a small wooden house on the edge of town, Nancy noticed her neighbor Laura rarely opened her curtains or doors despite living alone. Laura warned Nancy not to stay home alone since her husband, a military man, was often away on missions. Nancy spent her days inside, occasionally sitting on a swing under a tree, enjoying the quiet, though Laura told eerie stories about the area. One night, Nancy woke to sharp stomach pain and went downstairs for water, hearing strange whispering from the living room. There, a black cat sat staring at her, and the window was mysteriously open despite her closing it earlier. Suddenly, a chilling voice asked, "Will you give me your baby?" before Nancy blacked out. Her husband found her collapsed, but she couldn't recall what happened. Over time, strange things escalated. Food disappearing, unexplained noises, and eerie visitors, including Laura, who suddenly acted like she didn't know her. When her husband left for a 3-day mission, Nancy felt increasingly isolated and frightened. One night, while alone, she heard a woman's voice humming on the porch swing and felt cold breath on her back. As she turned around praying, her eyes locked on a figure whispering, "Laura," leaving her terrified of what or who really lived next door. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts. And remember, not every neighbor is who they seem to be. What if you moved to a quiet town, seeking peace, only to find the walls whispering that you were never truly alone? When Lisa inherited her late aunt's creaking Victorian home on the edge of Black Hollow, she thought the isolation might soothe her frayed nerves. "Fresh air, no noise, just me and the trees," she told herself. The neighbors, tight-lipped, eyes darting, warned her never to open the padlocked door in the cellar. Lisa laughed it off until the 4th night. Rain lashed the windows, wind howled through the tall pines, and beneath it all a child's laughter, faint, joyful, coming from beneath the floorboards. Her breath hitched. "I must be imagining this," she muttered, but each night the laughter returned, louder, longer, no longer playful, pleading. On the 7th night, she couldn't bear it. The cellar's rusted padlock groaned as she forced it open. Steps spiraled into darkness. Her flashlight flickered with every breath she took. "Hello? Is someone down here?" The stone walls pulsed with cold. Shadows twisted unnaturally. At the base of the stairs, she found a photograph nailed to the dirt. Her, as a child, grinning, surrounded by strangers whose faces had been scratched out. The laughter stopped. Then, slam. The cellar door above sealed shut. A voice whispered, "Every generation one returns." The town had always needed a caretaker for the secret below. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts. And remember, sometimes the echoes you follow are your own. What if the most beautiful thing in your hometown was also the deadliest? In Willow's Edge, everyone cherished the bellflowers, violet petals, sweet scent, and every dusk, the whole town gathered to watch them bloom. Mrs. Harper, who'd lost her son, claimed the flowers whispered his name in the wind. Tom, the mayor, swore the blossoms eased his guilt over an old betrayal he never confessed. The petals always shimmered at sunset, and no one questioned why the bellflowers only thrived here, as if the soil itself was alive. But when Annie, the new schoolteacher, arrived, she noticed something odd. Every dusk, the town's laughter grew softer, and the faces in the crowd seemed a little less familiar, like memories fading. She watched neighbors stare, entranced, at the flowers, their eyes glassy, smiles stretched too wide, as if pulled by invisible strings. One evening, desperate to escape before dusk, Annie tried to leave, but the roots twisted cold and tight around her ankles. The bellflowers bloomed fully, and she heard voices, hundreds of them, crying out from beneath the earth, whispering secrets no one should hear. As the petals brushed her skin, cold and alive, Annie realized the town's secret wasn't what the flowers gave, but what they took, souls trapped in silent bloom. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts. And remember, some petals never let go. What if the only streetlight in your small town didn't just keep out the darkness, but trapped something inside it? Derryville's Main Street had a single, ancient lamp that flickered to life every dusk. Folks called it the town's heartbeat, but no one ever lingered beneath it after sunset. One night, Tom, the new mailman, and a man burdened by guilt, missed his route's last delivery. Desperate to finish, he hurried under the lamp's waning glow. The air thickened, heavy and syrupy, and every shadow stretched too long, twisting unnaturally. Whispers curled around him, voices of people he'd known, all lost to mysterious disappearances over the years. Something cold brushed his neck, like a breath from nowhere. He tried to run, but his legs felt glued to the cracked pavement, his heart pounding deafeningly in his ears. In the glass of the lamp, he saw his reflection. Only it wasn't his face, but a shifting collage of all the missing townsfolk, their hollow eyes pleading silently. Dawn broke and the lamp went out. Tom was gone, his route forever unfinished. The townsfolk whispered, swearing the lamp flickered a little brighter that morning. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts. And remember, some lights are meant to stay broken. What if your town's proudest tradition was its greatest curse? Every October, Willow's End gathered for the Harvest Moon Festival, a night of cider, laughter, and bonfires. But this year, Danny, a lifelong outcast, noticed something off. The moon hung lower, redder, and the townsfolk's smiles seemed stretched too thin. His mother, hollow-eyed since last autumn, whispered warnings about the cornfields, but he brushed them off as old wives' tales. When the mayor led everyone to the fields for the midnight offering, Danny lingered behind, curiosity gnawing. He watched as the townspeople formed a silent circle, chanting words he'd never heard. The wind howled, and shadows twisted along the rows. Danny's heart pounded when he saw the ground ripple, as if the earth itself was breathing. Suddenly, hands, pale, clawed, burst from the soil, grasping at ankles. The crowd didn't run. They offered themselves, faces slack with devotion. Danny realized with icy dread that the harvest was not for them, but for something beneath. And as the hands dragged him under, he saw his mother in the circle, finally smiling. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts. And remember, some fields reap more than crops. What if the last sound you heard wasn't your friends laughing, but something laughing through them? Sarah didn't want to do it, but her friends chanted her name until she climbed out of the car. One dare, one TikTok challenge. Walk the dark Black Ridge Road, while they follow slowly in the car and film. Cold asphalt stretched ahead like an open throat, each step echoed. Sarah's breath fogged white. The filming ended abruptly, when Sarah tripped and fell. Pain burst through her knee. As her friends stopped and frantically called her name, the car's headlights revealed the object she had stumbled over, a Labubu doll. Upright, grinning. The night went silent, like someone had cut the world's audio track. A low hum seeped from nowhere, and everywhere. The horror spread when the Labubu's grin impossibly widened, its eyes turning malevolent red, and a distorted, synthesized voice screamed, "Trick or treat forever." The words glitched, overlapping themselves, louder, faster. Behind her, the car screamed to life, headlights flaring, speakers shrieking with the same voice. On the dashboard, the doll's red eyes blinked in sync, static crawling across every screen. Doors locked, lights dimmed. One by one, the phones inside went dark. And as Sarah crawled toward them, the car's hazard lights began to flash, in rhythm, like laughter counting down the end of something human. Welcome to Phantom Tales. Subscribe for horror that haunts, and remember, a dare at night can cost more than you think.